She poured an entire bottle of ice-cold water over my head in front of 50 people. Cameras were recording. Everyone was laughing. She told me I was trash, that I didn't belong in her world of luxury and wealth. What she didn't know, the quiet man standing in the corner, the one who saw everything, wasn't just any man. He was my husband, and he owned the very building we were standing in. My name is Sarah, and I'm about to tell you the most insane story of my life. About hidden identities, instant karma, and the moment a cruel woman's entire world came crashing down in less than 60 seconds. Trust me, you need to hear how this ends. This is a true story, and it's going to blow your mind. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. I'm standing here today to share something that happened to me in Los Angeles that changed everything. It's a story about judgment, about secrets, and about how life has a funny way of teaching lessons to those who need them most. But before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand how I got there. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago, if you had told me I would be married to one of the most successful real estate developers in America, I would have laughed until I cried. That's not the kind of life people like me end up living. I'm just ordinary. I've always been ordinary. And honestly, I liked it that way. I met my husband Thomas at a public library in Santa Monica. I know what you're thinking. A library? Yes, a library. I was working there as a children's librarian, which is something I absolutely loved. There's nothing more beautiful than watching a child's face light up when they discover a book they can't put down. I was shelving books in the young adult section when this man asked me to help him find something for his niece's birthday. He was wearing jeans and a plain blue shirt, nothing fancy. Just a regular guy who needed help picking out a book. We talked about stories for almost an hour. He told me about his niece, about how she loved adventure tales, and I recommended 3 books that I knew would be perfect. He came back the next week to tell me she'd already finished 2 of them. That's how it started. Simple. Real. Beautiful. We dated for almost a year before he told me the truth about who he was. By that time, I was already completely in love with him. Not with his money or his status, but with the man who remembered how I took my coffee, who listened when I talked about the kids at the library, who made me laugh until my stomach hurt. When he finally sat me down and explained that he was Thomas Wright, the real estate developer who'd built half of downtown Los Angeles, I almost didn't believe him. But what came next shocked me even more than learning about his wealth. He asked me to keep our relationship private. Completely private. He explained that his world was complicated, that every business deal he made got analyzed by investors and competitors, that having a public relationship would mean photographers following us everywhere, articles questioning whether I loved him or his money, strangers picking apart every aspect of my life. Neither of us wanted that. So we got married quietly, just our families present, and for 3 years we lived this beautiful double life. To the outside world, I was just Sarah Collins, the librarian who still worked at the Santa Monica Public Library because I loved it. Nobody knew that when I went home each night, I was going home to Thomas Wright, to a man whose business decisions shaped the entire city's skyline. It worked perfectly. I had my life, he had his, and when we were together, we were just us. No cameras, no questions, no judgment. Just 2 people who loved each other. I never felt like I was missing out on anything by keeping our marriage secret. If anything, it felt like we had something precious that the world couldn't touch. But then everything changed because of a single envelope that showed up at the library one Tuesday afternoon. One of my coworkers handed it to me during my lunch break, looking confused. "This came for you," she said. "Looks fancy." The envelope was thick and cream-colored, with elegant silver lettering that read, "You are cordially invited to an exclusive evening of luxury jewelry and fashion, hosted by Isabella Marchetti, founder of Marchetti Collections." I stared at that invitation for a long time, wondering how on earth I'd gotten on the guest list for what was clearly an elite Los Angeles event. I took it home and showed it to Thomas that evening. He looked at the invitation and smiled gently. "Do you want to go?" he asked. I wasn't sure. Part of me was curious about this world I'd been avoiding for 3 years. Part of me wanted to see what all the fuss was about, what these exclusive events were really like. Thomas never pressured me to attend industry gatherings or socialize with wealthy people. But maybe it was time. Maybe I was ready. The morning of the event, I stood in my closet feeling completely lost. Everything I owned suddenly seemed wrong. I didn't have designer clothes or expensive jewelry. I was just a regular woman who happened to be married to an extraordinary man, but nobody at this event would know that. Finally, I chose a simple navy blue dress that I'd bought from a department store. It was pretty, it was comfortable, and it made me feel like myself. I thought that would be enough. I had no idea how wrong I was about that. Looking back now, I can see that moment clearly, me standing in my bedroom, smoothing down that simple dress, thinking I was ready for whatever the evening would bring. I had no idea that in just a few hours, I would be standing in front of dozens of people, humiliated and dripping wet, while cameras captured every moment. I had no idea that my quiet, private life was about to be turned completely upside down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you exactly what happened that night in Los Angeles, because it's a story that needs to be told. It's a story about how we treat people, about assumptions we make, and about how sometimes the universe has a way of serving justice faster than anyone expects. The event was held in a penthouse in Beverly Hills that overlooked the entire city. When I walked through those doors, I knew immediately that I had made a mistake. This wasn't just fancy. This was wealth on a level I'd never experienced, even though I was married to it. Women floated through the space in gowns that probably cost more than a year of my library salary. Men wore suits so perfectly tailored they looked like they'd been sewn directly onto their bodies. Everyone sparkled. Diamonds, gold, platinum. It was everywhere. The jewelry displays scattered throughout the penthouse looked like something from a museum, each piece sitting on white velvet under special lighting that made them glow like captured stars. I accepted a glass of champagne from a server and tried to make myself invisible. I focused on the displays, admiring the craftsmanship of the pieces. Some of them truly were beautiful. Delicate necklaces that looked like spun moonlight, bracelets covered in stones that caught every bit of light in the room. But then I accidentally saw a price tag. A simple silver bracelet was marked at $1,200. My stomach dropped. That's when I first noticed her watching me. Isabella Marchetti was the kind of woman who commanded attention just by existing. Tall, elegant, with perfect posture and hair styled so precisely it looked like it had been painted on. She wore a black evening gown that probably cost more than my car, and she was surrounded by people who hung on her every word like she was royalty. But her eyes kept finding me, and I could see the disapproval written clearly on her face. My navy blue department store dress suddenly felt like a costume, like I was a child playing dress-up in my mother's closet. I tried to ignore the stares and just appreciate the beautiful things around me. I've always loved beautiful things, even if I couldn't afford them. But my peaceful browsing didn't last long. A woman in an expensive cream-colored suit approached me with a smile that looked more like a warning. "Excuse me," she said sweetly, but her eyes were cold. "Are you here with the catering team? The service entrance is in the back." My face got hot, but I kept my voice calm. "No, I'm actually a guest. I have an invitation." Her eyebrows shot up so high they almost disappeared into her hairline. She looked me up and down again, taking in every detail of my simple dress and basic shoes. "Oh," she said, making the word sound like an insult. "Well, I suppose they're letting anyone in these days." Before I could respond, she'd already turned away, but I could hear her whispering to her friend about declining standards and the wrong sort of people. That old familiar feeling from middle school came rushing back, the feeling of not belonging, of being on the outside looking in. But I wasn't a kid anymore, and I wasn't going to let them chase me away. I lifted my chin and kept walking, determined to enjoy the evening regardless of what anyone thought. That's when Isabella Marchetti herself decided it was time to confront me directly. She glided over with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. Her black dress moved like water, and her diamond jewelry caught the light with every step. She was stunning, but there was something cruel in her eyes that made my skin crawl. "I don't believe we've met," she said, extending a hand covered in rings that probably cost more than my annual salary. "I'm Isabella Marchetti, owner of Marchetti Collections." "And you are?" "Sarah," I replied, shaking her hand briefly. Her grip was cold and firm. "Thank you for hosting such a beautiful event. The pieces are absolutely stunning." She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that held no warmth at all. "How lovely that you appreciate them. Tell me, Sarah, what brings you to an event like this? Are you a fashion journalist, perhaps? A lifestyle influencer?" I could hear the judgment in every word. She was testing me, trying to figure out why someone dressed like me was at her exclusive event. "I received an invitation," I said simply. "I wanted to see your collection." "How interesting," Isabella said, her eyes scanning my outfit with obvious disgust. And what do you do for work? I'm a children's librarian, I answered honestly. It was true, and I was proud of it. I loved my job, and it helped me feel like I had my own identity separate from being a billionaire's hidden wife. Isabella's smile became even more patronizing. How quaint. Well, I do hope you're finding everything educational. Though I should mention that most of our pieces start around $8,000. Just so you know what you're looking at. The message was crystal clear. These things aren't for people like you. Anger bubbled up in my chest, but I kept my voice level. They're beautiful. Someone with incredible talent made them. Yes, well, she said, her voice getting louder now. Other guests were starting to notice our conversation. I could see phones coming out as people sensed drama. Talent and exclusivity go hand in hand. We cater to a very specific clientele, people who can truly appreciate luxury, not just admire it from a distance. That's when I saw him. Thomas was standing near the back of the room, partially hidden behind a group admiring a jewelry display. He was wearing a simple dark suit, and he'd been so quiet that most people probably hadn't noticed him arrive. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw him register what was happening. His jaw tightened, but he stayed where he was. We'd agreed long ago that he wouldn't interfere unless I asked him to. But as Isabella continued talking, I could see him moving slowly closer through the crowd. And I had no idea that in the next few minutes, everything was about to explode. Isabella wasn't finished with me yet. She'd gathered quite an audience by now, and I could tell she was enjoying being the center of attention. The crowd grew larger, forming a semicircle around us. I felt trapped, exposed, like an animal in a zoo exhibit. You know, Sarah, she continued, her voice carrying across the conversations around us. I'm curious about something. This is a very exclusive event. Our guest list is carefully curated. I personally approve every single invitation. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. She was about to challenge my right to be there in front of everyone, turning my presence into public entertainment. I definitely received an invitation, I said, reaching into my small purse with trembling hands. I pulled out the cream-colored card and held it out to her. Isabella took it from me and examined it dramatically, holding it up to the light like she was checking for counterfeit money. The crowd had grown even larger now, and I could hear whispered conversations, see more phones appearing. This was their entertainment for the evening. Well, she finally said, handing the invitation back with theatrical flair. This does appear to be genuine. How mysterious. I wonder how such an obvious mistake could have happened. She turned to address her audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have a little puzzle here. I wanted to disappear. Every single person in that penthouse was staring at me now. My simple navy dress felt like a neon sign screaming that I didn't belong in their world of wealth and privilege. Perhaps, Isabella continued with fake concern, there was some kind of administrative error. Sometimes invitations get sent to the wrong addresses. It happens with mass mailings, especially when you're dealing with less sophisticated mailing lists. The humiliation was overwhelming, washing over me in waves. But something deep inside me refused to back down. Maybe it was 3 years of being married to one of the most powerful men in California. Maybe it was just plain stubbornness. But I wasn't going to let her chase me away. There was no error, I said quietly but firmly. I belong here just as much as anyone else. Isabella's mask of politeness fell away completely. Do you? She asked, her voice sharp and cruel. Because I'm looking at you, dear, and I'm seeing someone who clearly doesn't understand what this event is about. This isn't a community center craft fair. This is about luxury, about exclusivity, about maintaining standards. She gestured at my outfit like I was wearing rags. You're wearing what, a $60 dress from a department store? Those shoes probably came from a discount rack. And that jewelry? She actually laughed, a cold sound that made several people wince. I've seen better pieces in drugstore displays. The crowd was eating it up. Phones were recording, people were whispering, some looking genuinely shocked while others seemed entertained by the spectacle. With each word she spoke, I felt smaller and more exposed. The problem with events like this, Isabella announced to her captive audience, is that sometimes the wrong sort of people slip through. People who don't understand that luxury isn't just about buying something expensive. It's about belonging to a world that values quality and proper breeding. I glanced toward Thomas. He'd moved significantly closer now, weaving through the crowd with purposeful movement. I could see the storm building in his eyes, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. But he was still holding back, waiting for me to signal that I needed help. I think there's been enough drama, I said, trying to leave with whatever dignity I had left. Maybe I should just go. Oh, you absolutely should go, Isabella agreed with vicious satisfaction. But first, I think we need a teachable moment here about maintaining standards. She walked over to a nearby table where servers had arranged bottles of sparkling water. The crowd followed her movement, like she was performing on stage. Without warning, she grabbed one of the bottles, unscrewed the cap, and held it high above her head. This, she declared to the entire room, her voice carrying over every conversation, is what happens when we don't maintain proper standards. When we let just anyone into exclusive spaces. And before I could react, before my brain could even process what was happening, she poured the entire bottle of ice-cold water directly over my head. The shock hit me first, the freezing water running down my face, soaking my hair, drenching my dress. Then came the gasps from the crowd, the exclamations of shock and horror. I stood there stunned and dripping while Isabella smiled with pure triumphant cruelty. Now, she said, satisfaction dripping from every word, I think you understand exactly where you belong. The entire penthouse went silent except for the sound of water dripping onto the marble floor and the quiet clicking of camera phones. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, some shocked, some horrified, some clearly entertained. My navy dress was soaked through, clinging to my skin, and my hair hung in wet strands around my face. But instead of crying or running away, which is what Isabella clearly expected, I stood perfectly still. I wiped the water from my eyes with as much dignity as I could manage and looked directly at her. Does that make you feel better about yourself? I asked quietly. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Isabella's face. She hadn't expected me to respond with anything except tears or anger or humiliation. I think, she said, recovering quickly, that you've gotten the message. Security can escort you out. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, measured, and somehow carrying more authority than all of Isabella's shouting had managed. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Thomas. I recognized his walk, the particular way he moved when he was absolutely furious but trying to maintain control. The crowd sensed it too. Conversations stopped. People turned. And the energy in the room shifted completely. Thomas walked through the crowd like he owned the building. Which, I suddenly realized with a jolt, he very well might. He stopped right beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence. Without saying a single word, he pulled a clean handkerchief from his suit pocket and gently began dabbing the water from my face and hair. His touch was so tender, so protective. Somehow in that moment, with his careful attention, I felt less exposed despite my soaked dress and the staring crowd. He treated me like I was something precious, something valuable, right there in front of everyone who had just watched me be humiliated. Excuse me, Isabella said, clearly annoyed by this interruption. This is a private event. If you're not on the guest list. I am, Thomas said quietly, still focused on helping me dry off. He wasn't even looking at her yet. Isabella looked him up and down dismissively. His dark suit was clearly expensive, but it wasn't flashy. He didn't wear obvious luxury accessories or designer labels. In her world of status symbols, he looked like nobody important. I don't recall approving your invitation either, she said with renewed confidence, emboldened by what she thought was support from her audience. Thomas finally looked up at her. Something in his expression made several people in the crowd instinctively step backward. When he was truly angry, Thomas had a way of looking at people that could freeze you in place. I don't need your approval for anything, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that made the hair on my arms stand up. Oh really? Isabella laughed sharply. And who exactly are you supposed to be? Her boyfriend? Her husband? She turned to the crowd again, playing to her audience. Let me guess, you're a school teacher? A small business owner? Thomas straightened to his full height. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I'm her husband, he said simply. The effect was immediate. Isabella's confident smile faltered for just a moment. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone behind me whispered, "Wait, what?" But Isabella recovered quickly, her laugh becoming even more mocking. Her husband. Oh, that's precious. What are you, a mechanic? A retail manager? She gestured dramatically at both of us. Did you hear that, everyone? The library girl found someone to marry her. Several people in the crowd looked uncomfortable now, sensing something was changing but not understanding what. Some were still recording, but others had quietly lowered their phones. That's when someone in the crowd gasped audibly. A man in an expensive suit had pulled out his phone and was staring at the screen with wide, shocked eyes. "Oh my God," he whispered. But in the silence of the room, everyone heard him. "What?" someone else asked. "That's Thomas Wright," he said, his voice getting stronger as realization hit him fully. "That's Thomas Wright." The name rippled through the crowd like electricity. Phones came out immediately as people began frantically searching. I watched face after face change from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. "Thomas Wright," another voice said, high and tight with sudden anxiety. "The real estate developer." "Wait," someone else said, barely above a whisper. "Wright Development. Don't they own like half the buildings in downtown LA?" "They own this building," another person added, and I could hear the dawning horror in their voice. "Wright Development owns this entire complex." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. Isabella looked like someone had hit her with a brick. Her face went completely white as the implications began to sink in. People in the crowd were frantically deleting videos, while others stood frozen in place. Thomas didn't say anything else. He didn't need to make threats or dramatic declarations. His identity, his presence, was enough to completely transform everything. He simply put his arm around my shoulders with infinite gentleness and began guiding me toward the exit. As we walked, I could hear Isabella's voice behind us, high and desperate, completely stripped of its earlier arrogance. "Wait, Mr. Wright, please wait. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." I had no idea who she was. I never would have. But we didn't stop. Thomas led me through the crowd of stunned faces into the elevator, and as the doors closed on the chaos behind us, I finally allowed myself to breathe again. "I'm sorry," I said as we descended. "I should have asked for your help sooner. I shouldn't have let it go that far." He turned to face me, his eyes still dark with anger, but his voice incredibly gentle. "You have nothing to apologize for. You handled that with more grace than she deserved." "Did you see the look on her face?" I asked, and despite everything, I found myself starting to smile. "I saw it," he said, pulling me closer. "But more importantly, I saw how you stood up for yourself. How you refused to be broken down. I'm so incredibly proud of you." In that elevator, soaking wet and probably looking like a complete mess, I felt something shift inside me. For 3 years, I'd been hiding from Thomas's world, convinced I didn't belong in it. But standing there in my ruined department store dress, I realized something important. I did belong. Not because of designer clothes or expensive jewelry or the right connections. I belonged because I was strong enough to hold my own, because I treated people with respect, because I knew who I was regardless of what anyone else thought. The quiet librarian who everyone had underestimated. She was more powerful than any of them had imagined. And sometimes karma arrives exactly when it's needed most. The next morning, I woke up to discover the story was everywhere. Someone had managed to record the entire incident before Thomas's identity was revealed, and the internet had exploded. Within hours, everyone knew exactly what had happened and who was involved. Isabella Marchetti was trending on social media for all the wrong reasons. Hashtags like #WaterBottleGate and #LuxuryFail were attached to her name. People were sharing the video, discussing it, analyzing every word she'd said and every expression on her face. The court of public opinion had reached its verdict, and it wasn't in her favor. But it wasn't just social media drama. There were real consequences. By the end of that first week, Marchetti Collection's stock price had dropped significantly. 3 major department stores announced they would no longer carry her jewelry line. Several celebrities who had previously been brand ambassadors quietly removed all mentions of her company from their social media accounts. Isabella issued multiple public apologies, each one more desperate than the last. She claimed she'd been having a bad day, that her behavior didn't reflect her true values, that she was seeking therapy and personal growth. But the damage was done. In today's world, moments like that get captured forever. There's no taking them back, no erasing them, no pretending they didn't happen. Within a month, I heard through Thomas's business connections that she was facing serious financial difficulties. There was talk of having to sell the company entirely. Some people might say that was too harsh, that everyone makes mistakes. But this wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate, cruel act of humiliation done in front of dozens of people. It revealed something about her character that couldn't be explained away. I want to be clear about something, though. I didn't take pleasure in watching her world fall apart. Honestly, what happened that night in the penthouse was punishment enough. Public humiliation is a terrible thing, even when someone brings it on themselves. I know because I experienced it firsthand, standing there dripping wet while cameras captured my lowest moment. But I did learn something incredibly important through the whole experience. Several things, actually, that I want to share with you because I think they matter. First, I learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. For 3 years, I'd been hiding from Thomas's world, convinced that I wasn't enough for it. I thought I needed designer clothes and the right connections and a completely different personality to survive in that environment. But when the moment came, when I was tested in the worst possible way, I didn't break. I didn't run crying. I stood there with dignity and faced it head-on. Second, I learned that respect has nothing to do with expensive clothes or jewelry or how much money you have in your bank account. Real respect comes from how you treat other people, especially when you have power over them. Isabella had all the money and status in the world that night, but she had no respect, not from others and clearly not for herself. Because people who truly respect themselves don't need to tear others down to feel important. Third, I learned that sometimes the quiet people, the ones everyone overlooks and underestimates, might be the most powerful people in the room. Not just because my husband happened to be a billionaire, but because quiet strength is often the truest kind of strength. The people who don't need to announce their worth, who don't need to perform for an audience, who are secure enough in themselves to just be. Those are the people you should never underestimate. Most importantly, I learned that I didn't need to hide anymore. After that night, Thomas and I talked seriously about our private life. We decided it was time to stop keeping our marriage a secret. Not because of what happened with Isabella, but because I realized I was ready. I was ready to step into his world as an equal partner, not as someone who needed to be protected from it. I'm still a children's librarian. I still go to work every day at the Santa Monica Public Library, and I still love every minute of it. That hasn't changed. But now when people ask about my personal life, I don't have to hide or make excuses. I can just be honest about who I am, all of me, not just the parts one thought were acceptable. The story went viral not just because of the dramatic reveal or the instant karma, but because it touched on something people deeply understand. We've all felt judged at some point. We've all been in situations where we felt like we didn't measure up, where someone made us feel small or unworthy. And we've all wished, just once, that the universe would step in and show those judgmental people exactly how wrong they were. That's why this story resonated with millions of people around the world. It wasn't about money or status or revenge. It was about basic human dignity. It was about treating people with kindness regardless of what they're wearing or what they do for work or where they come from. If I could go back and change that night, I'm not sure I would. Yes, the humiliation was terrible. Standing there soaking wet while people recorded my shame was one of the worst moments of my life. But it taught me who I really am. It showed me my own strength. And it reminded me that sometimes the universe has a way of balancing things out when you least expect it. So here's what I want you to take away from this story. Don't judge people based on appearances. Don't assume you know someone's worth because of their clothes or their job or their zip code. Treat everyone with respect and dignity, because you truly never know who you're dealing with. And that quiet person you're overlooking, they might just surprise you. Sometimes karma arrives faster than anyone expects. And sometimes the library girl in the department store dress turns out to be exactly where she belongs all along. Thank you for listening to my story.